The following program is a WSRE original documentary.
Throughout its colorful history under a variety of flags, Pensacola has played roles, large and small, in virtually every conflict in the North American continent. From early Spanish times to 21st century involvements, local men and women served in the military. Many have become fallen heroes. At appropriate times, memorials were placed to honor those of the war between the states and World War I. Yet in the late 20th century, no concentrated Veterans Park had been considered, despite the fact that this region held the greatest concentration of living veterans in the land. There had been talk among the veterans, but nothing had happened. And then, in 1987, the Moving Wall arrived.
The Moving Wall was a portable replica of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which had been created in Washington.
So I was with the United States Marine Corps in Vietnam, Huey door gunner and crew chief. Served in I Corps, which is the northern end of South Vietnam around Da Nang, Hue, Phu Bai, Quang Tri. I brought my family to the wall there and showed it to them and was really impressed with the solemnness and togetherness that it brought and the feeling of peace that it brought when I saw it.
As this memorial made its local visit, it was seen by scores of Vietnam veterans. One of them, Lenny Collins, said to a friend, "Why can't such a memorial be built here?" Well, that thought triggered action.
There was a young Marine Lance Corporal that served in Vietnam that came up with the idea of replicating the National Vietnam Memorial here in Pensacola. The Vietnam veterans got together and started an organization called the Vietnam Veterans of Northwest Florida. And out of it grew the Vietnam Veterans Wall South Foundation.
And so the group of us just started discussing the possibilities of building something here. And we decided, after many long hours of discussion and back and forth, that we wanted it to be a replica of the one in Washington, have all the names on it. But we also knew that we couldn't build one the same size. So we decided on one that was about a half-size replica of the one up in Washington.
Many steps were required between conception and reality. First was a visible location. The veterans made surveys, then asked the Pensacola City Council to set aside portions of what had been the Admiral Mason Baseball Park facing the bay. The council agreed, setting aside 5.5 acres for what was to become a true Veterans Park.
Artists, high school classes, and more offered ideas, including building a scale model.
We got in touch with an architect who did some design work for us. We knew it was going to cost money, so we had to do fundraisers. We played softball, we had runs, we did car washes, just to raise funds to build the park. When we finally got our design done, we found that it was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million+ to build this place. So we had some serious fundraising to do.
By Veterans Day 1991, the initial design was approved. On that day, veterans, government officials, and more helped break ground for the project. In days that followed, much of the work of design, engineering, and then professional skills such as concrete finishing for the wall's backing and the entrance rotunda was performed by volunteers. The wall would be shaped as a V, 256 feet from end to end, ranging in height from 8 feet 2 inches at the high point to just 2 inches at the ends. The wall would back 64 black granite panels carrying the 58,217 names of those who had made the supreme sacrifice.
Park entry was through what planners called the Rotunda, a circular base with concrete seating with a giant flagpole at the center. The Vietnam Wall and the park itself were dedicated in solemn ceremonies on October 24, 1992. And with the dedication, there stood the memorial, the vision on which so many had worked so hard for so long. It was, as spokesman emphasized, a half-sized, exact replica of the original in the nation's capital. From that first moment, this would be a memorial visited by countless friends, families, reunions, men and women by the thousands, with memories of loved ones whose names were listed. That was the dream that proved to be the reality.
This place was absolutely unbelievable. There were more than 50,000 people converged on this little stretch of property right here.
It took us 5 years from the time that we came up with the idea until we broke ground and had the park built. And it was a sight to behold. The place was packed from almost street to street here, but seeing all the people that came, we had Gold Star mothers, Gold Star wives, daughters, brothers, sisters of people who had relatives on the wall.
It was wall-to-wall people. And when the curtains or these drapes that was hiding the wall, when they went up, this place just was an absolute uproar. You would think the greatest rock star that ever lived had just made an appearance. And then the names were read off, all 58,000 plus names. Then it was just dead, absolutely dead silence. After all these ceremonies was over, then the park was open and people were allowed to go down to the actual wall and look for loved ones. And there were people down there seemed like for hours on end. They just didn't want to leave. The only thing they wanted to do was reach out and touch a name once they had found it. And people would cry. People left all kinds of mementos at the wall. Everything from bracelets to metal to 6 packs of beer. Words cannot describe the feeling that came over every single one of us that was here for that dedication. You look at those names, 58,000 plus Americans. That's larger than my hometown. And when I think of growing up in my hometown in West Virginia, and I thought it was from a fairly large area at the time, and then I look at this park, 58,000 plus Americans. And then I look at my own life now. A father, a grandfather, most of these people never had that opportunity.
My brother and I both served in Vietnam. He was in the Army, and of course I was in the Marine Corps. He served down at an Army base outside of Saigon called Lai Kay, and he was wounded twice and was awarded 2 Bronze Stars. And I served up in the Ai Corps area, the northern area of South Vietnam, and I was wounded twice and received 2 Bronze Stars, and quite an experience. That's where we said we always went on our high school trip. Everyone went to Vietnam. So. This is Kenneth Hatcher. He and I attended high school together, played football together. He was with Special Forces in Vietnam as a first lieutenant and was killed in action in Cambodia and received the Distinguished Service Cross, which is second only to the Medal of Honor.
Wall South, when I first heard what they were doing years and years ago in Washington, frankly, I was on the side of the people who were opposed to it. It looked like a black slash in the earth that was really not complimentary to the people who served in Vietnam. But when I got the first look at it, I changed my mind dramatically. It's a most emotional, important monument, and I don't think there's anything like it anywhere. That we reproduced it here, I think, is a tribute to the people who served in it, and I don't think there's anyone that can't find an emotional connection with that wall. I have many friends on there. My very best friend and brother-in-law is on there, and it's a very tight connection that we have with this Vietnam Wall.
And I remember My mother was here, and my father and my kids and my wife, but my mother told me that she watched me standing there, and it hit her at that time that I could have just as easily been a name on the wall instead of standing there dedicating the wall to those that had fallen. And that really got inside of me because, again, they knew very little of what went on over there or what I did.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of items that are left here at the wall, and we come down here about every other week and collect them up and mark on the back sides what panel they were left on. The letters from children whose fathers or mothers may have been killed in Vietnam. We store everything away and put it all out on Veterans Day and on Memorial Day. But everything from letters to poems to books, an assortment of military medals, packs of cigarettes, because we always shared our cigarettes with one another, cans of beer. I mean, it's just a myriad of items that to some people may not have any meaning whatsoever, but it meant something to that individual that left that down here.
I was the leading chief photographer's mate on the Oriskany. One day there was a young man, 24-year-old naval aviator named Charles Taylor. Charlie was from Huntsville, Alabama. He is now on panel 12 of the wall south. So now, every time I come down here, and usually at least once a month or so, I walk down to panel 12 and I talk to Mr. Taylor. And I've done it ever since this wall was dedicated. Every Vietnam veteran, no exceptions, should come to this park. Walk down to those panels, talk. Talk to your fellow Vietnam vets. It helps. It really and truly does. Suddenly, you're no longer an old 65, 70-year-old man. You're a young kid again. You're a vibrant young man or woman. You're ready to do whatever is necessary to make sure that our country stays free.
However, in the minds of the veterans, the Vietnam Memorial would be but step one. The Veterans Park would be much more.
Park planners reasoned that the next logical step in developing a true Veterans Park would be the relocation of the 1918 memorial from Garden Street to the Bayfront site. However, the original memorial was formed from porous sandstone. Inspection revealed that it just would not survive movement. The answer was to recast the memorial in exact size and with its text, this time in beautiful white marble. And so the World War I symbol was mounted on a slight rise immediately facing Bayfront Parkway and the bay.
My grandfather was World War I. My father was World War II. He was a Pearl Harbor survivor in World War II. And myself, you know, I'm a Vietnam vet. The picture that I'm holding is my grandfather, Alphonse J. Barrios. He was born in the late 1890s and joined the Army in 1914 and then was honorably discharged at 1918, and that was the time during World War I. He was with the 15th Field Artillery Division. Wonderful man, wonderful man.
Next came a small but significant memorial to children. Why children in a veterans park? Because veterans themselves recognized how often children, some even as yet unborn, have suffered loss of parents fighting on foreign shores. One of those children was young Randy New, a skilled sculptor from nearby Pace.
My father was killed in Vietnam a few days before my 6th birthday. So obviously I was excited about having the wall in my own backyard. And I would say that the Veterans Park here is probably the most sacred piece of real estate on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. You know, my father's spirit is here. And so as an artist, I thought, well, maybe there's something I can do And one of the first things was this children's memorial. It was for people who lost their father in Vietnam. I used my daughter as a model for it. Because that's my daughter and because that's my father, you know, this place is, like I said, sacred to me.
From the beginning, the Veterans Group recognized that those who served in World War II and that conflict's events must be recognized. How the war story would be portrayed required weeks of debate. Agreement was reached that the account would be told through chronological bronze panels which identified the key events. One segment would deal with the European conflict, the second would highlight the war in the South Pacific. And this is what was created. The center of the memorial has a large Roman numeral II illustrating World War II. Across that memorial is the large letter V, completing the symbol V for victory as Winston Churchill had so effectively presented it. 4 of the life-size figures flank the centerpiece. The 5th, representing all women who served, stands apart. Captain Bob Rasmussen, the director of the National Museum of Naval Aviation and a skilled sculptor, agreed to prepare and supervise the completion of the 5 statues.
Well, there are 5 statues altogether, plus a bronze piece right in the center under the big V for victory, obviously. First of all, the piece underneath the V is a rifle stuck in the ground with a helmet, which is symbolic, I think, of the people who were lost in any military operation, and we decided to include that for that reason. The other 4 that are standing around the V represents the services that participated in the war, the sea services by the sailor, that would be the Navy and the Coast Guard. Of course, the airman who is representing the U.S. Army Air Corps, the Army Air Force later, and the Marine who's representing the Marine Corps that did so much in the Pacific War, and the soldier that really carried the war in the European campaign. The 5th figure on the memorial is a woman. And of course, women in those days didn't fight in the war per se. They were not part of the combat forces, but there were many, many women who were directly involved with the combat forces in support. And of course, there were so many women who were behind the war effort here at home and in various parts of the services that we thought it very important that they be represented in the memorial.
The World War II Memorial was dedicated Veterans Day 2004.
The next stage of the park came with design and funding of a memorial to honor the many thousands who fought, were prisoners of war, and who perished in Korea. In determining content for this memorial, the planning rested with Korean veterans themselves. Their memories, the pain this epoch represented, and then some of the geographic and chronological features were to be included.
My name is Tex Atkinson. I was a Navy pilot during the Korean War. Had 2 combat tours. First was in December of 1950 when we started bringing the Marines and Army out of the Chosin Reservoir. My last one was in the fall of 1952. That was right after we had bombed the hydroelectric plants in Korea, which had a lot to do with bringing about the armistice in '53. I think anyone in the Korean War would be proud to see this place that someone remembers. A place to remember a very tough war, much tougher than American people realize, most of them, and think about all the great guys I knew, and particularly say hi to those that did not make it back.
The Korean Memorial complements the World War II placement and is located just yards away on a slight tree-rimmed rise. The oval-shaped pedestal has at its center a tall granite figure which presents the map of Korea with landmark designations to highlight the major events. Small indicators pinpoint actions which history must recall. To the forefront are 3 life-size bronze figures. 2 of these men bear likenesses to those who were at the tip of the spear in combat. The third represents the humane considerations in which so many of the military men and women became responsible. Captain Rasmussen was the artist for two of the figures. Randy New prepared the third.
When the Korean Memorial was going on, there was an interest in them having some sculpture, and so I went to them and asked them, if I could help doing that. So we brainstormed for months about designs and came up with ideas for the sculpture. And because I'm not a veteran myself, I wasn't in the military, I'm a civilian. When I did the soldier for the Korean Memorial, I wanted to do a humanitarian figure. And that's why I chose the sculpture of the medic with the child. Because to me, what Korea was about was us rescuing South Korea. So the medic represents the U.S. and the small child represents the small country of South Korea. And it was a rescue effort. I also, on that sculpture, didn't include a lot of uniform. He's stripped down to his t-shirt. I wanted to show the human behind the soldier, the man behind the uniform. So there's that real human-to-human connection between the man and the child. You'll also notice that he doesn't have a single weapon on him. There's no guns, there's no knives, there's no hand grenades, there's no weapons to speak of. The only thing he has is a canteen, and a canteen is something you aid somebody with, Give him a drink of water, so he's not a fighter, he's the humanitarian figure.
The dedication ceremony for the memorial was held Memorial Day 2007 with a huge assembly present.
Two other memorials help broaden the theme of Veterans Park. The first stands beside the Serpentine Walk, which passes through the park, and is dedicated to all who have served in the Navy's submarines. The monument lists the 87 submarines that have served our country and credits the vessels with rescues of 504 airmen and crew members. The goal with this memorial is to have present and future generations remember those who served in the ocean's depths and did not survive.
The most recent addition to Veterans Park is a memorial to all veterans who have earned the Purple Heart, the nation's medal which recognizes injury in combat. This memorial, dedicated Veterans Day 2006, is the same as those raised and honored in many parts of the United States. For scores of communities have seen fit to note this honor, a medal which had its birth in the time of the nation's first military commander-in-chief, General George Washington.
Yeah, we had a Huey erected up many years ago that had flown with the Navy Sea Wolves, and Hurricane Ivan, in all of its illustrious history, decided to turn it 90 degrees to the right and nose down and just completely destroyed it. So we had a nationwide search on to try to replace the Huey, but we were unable to get a Huey. Then I received a phone call from the vice president of Bell Helicopter stating he had a Cobra helicopter that they'd be willing to donate to us and ship it over here at their cost. And it's been a great addition to the park. The Marines call that Cobra helicopter the angel from the sky. So it's only appropriate that it flies over Wall South.
And so Northwest Florida has its Veterans Park, visited by hundreds each month, some from out of the area, some as part of military reunions, many as students gaining appreciation of this part of their heritage. They come, they see, they gain an appreciation of the debt which all Americans owe to veterans.
But the first list has got 27 casualties in chronological order. Those that we know for sure were KIA in Vietnam, well in the 178th. 4 of the 5 crewmen did not survive the crash of 445, which was shot down 26 August 1970. Daniel York from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Jaime McDougall from Thompson Falls, Montana. George Teft from Oklahoma City. And Joel York from Fort Walton Beach, Florida. The next 2 are incidents that were mine, that's how I know about them, but a Vietnamese woman was killed by ground fire sometime in May 1966. She was right here, right next to me. There was also a Vietnamese boy that was wounded in that. She was killed right next to me in the middle of a firefight. That's all I have. That's enough. That's enough. Amen.
You can probably talk to any of our family members and they won't know much about our time over there. But the park helps with that. I don't get down here as often as I would like, but when I do, it's just peaceful and soothing, just being here and seeing the enormity of it and the humanity of it. And it means a lot to those of us that were there. Somehow we feel slightly guilty because we're here and they're not. But it also, it helps us and it helps the relatives, the wives, the mothers, the brothers, the sisters, the children. People will be able to come here from this area and see what just a small handful of old tired vets could do to make things better for ourselves and for our descendants as they come along and help explain to them what maybe we went through.
You can come down here and sit for a 24-hour period and you're going to see people down here no matter what time of day or night. It's quiet, it's serene, and that people come down here and pay the respects. And I mean, even visiting the World War I Memorial, of which there's probably very few relatives left from veterans that fought in that war. But it's a time for remembrance, and most importantly to pay the respects to those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine and Coast Guardsmen that sacrificed their lives for the defense of the country.
This memorial to me just stand very proud for my city, my community, our country, for putting together a fine park and a memorial. It stands for those who cut the path before us. We can live free. Freedom isn't free.
The military heritage of this area, with its naval air presence, its historic forts, its thousands of retirees, surely profits from the presence of Veterans Park. For those who live nearby, the invitation is always present to visit often and to make the park a stopping place when they host visitors. For every citizen, the invitation remains to take time at every patriotic occasion to remember that Veterans Park is where all can come, remember, and be grateful to all who have served. And as we do so, may all say, God bless America.